Welcome to the Happier and Healthier podcast. I'm your host, Maria Marlowe, and this is a place where we don't rely on good luck or good genes for our health and happiness, but rather we create it with our thoughts and our actions each and every single day. Each week, I'll bring you a thought or a guest that will help you live your happiest and healthiest life. Are you ready? Welcome back to the Happier and Healthier podcast. Today's interview is with Dr. Jess Peatross, a traditional MD turned holistic MD after her own personal awakening. She'll get into further detail in the interview, but in short, after working in hospitals and traditional medicine for 6 years, she realized her patients weren't actually getting better. The hospital doors were just revolving doors, seeing the same people over and over again. Plus, the long hours and demanding schedule took a toll on her own health, and she experienced anxiety, hormonal imbalances, and adrenal dysfunction. She began to realize that allopathic medicine didn't have all of the answers she was seeking, so she then sought out training in the world of holistic healing, energy work, nutrigenomics, stem cells, cannabis, and Gerson therapy. Her philosophy now embodies true health as being all-encompassing of mind, body, and spirit, and now she shares an incredible message of holistic health on her various online platforms. She also has her own line of wildcrafted herbal supplements for chronic everyday conditions and is the founder and chief medical officer of drjess.com. I think it's so important that when it comes to our health that we seek out well-rounded practitioners who will help us get to the root of our problem rather than just cover it up with a Band-Aid solution, or worse, tell you that you're crazy or that you're fine even when you know something's wrong. Now, before we jump into the interview, I want to let you know that enrollment for Eat Slim, my 10-week online nutrition and cooking course, is now open, and the class starts January 4th. If you want to get healthier in the new year, if you want more energy, less brain fog, better digestion, less cravings, or to simply slim down, this is the class for you. I've been running this course for many years now, and it was originally in-person course in New York City, and then I shifted it online so that people can join from anywhere in the world, and it's repeatedly been called life-changing. Whether you want to improve your own health or that of your families, this course will give you the tools, inspiration, knowledge, roadmap, and support you need to embark on a healthier lifestyle and to maintain it for the long run. You'll quit sugar and junk food and not even miss it. You'll learn to crave vegetables and the healthiest foods. You'll feel more confident cooking and knowing what to order when you go out to eat because you'll know exactly what to eat for your unique body. When you upgrade your diet, you upgrade your life. Think of all the things you're missing out on from not feeling good or not having energy. If you want to lose weight and keep it off without feeling deprived, this course is for you. If you have a high blood pressure or high cholesterol or you're pre-diabetic, this course can help. If you have chronic digestive issues like gas, constipation, bloating, or IBS, this course can help. If you feel generally lethargic, low energy, less productive than usual, and like your memory just isn't what it used to be, this course can help. If you think you don't really like healthy food or you don't know how to cook it, this course can help you. You can find the full details at mariamarlowe.com/eat-slim, or simply go to mariamarlowe.com, and Marlowe is MARLOWE, and click Nutrition and Cooking Course in the menu bar. I hope to see many of you guys in class. Now, on to my interview with Dr. Jess Peatross. Dr. Jess, welcome to the show.
Hello, Maria. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here because your Instagram is one of my favorite Instagrams, and I just love you. Put so much information out there, and I learn so much from you all of the time. So if you don't follow her, go follow her. It's dr.jess.md. But can you give us a little bit of your background? I love that you started in Western medicine and now have completely have a very more holistic view of medicine. So can you just give us a little bit of your background and what you do?
For sure. So, I have been, let's see, I started out in internal medicine actually, and in Kentucky, in all the places of the world, at the University of Louisville. And people always ask me, "Hey, if you could do this again, would you do it?" And I said, "Well, no. If I believed everything they told me in school, I ate it up and really regurgitated it just like they taught me, and was so gung ho about the system." And then I got done with my internal medicine degree and I went into residency, which is where you work almost 80 hours a week. And it's a lot of grunt work and, being hazed almost like an old boys fraternity. And I was a little disgruntled because over the years, I started to see that everything that I had learned wasn't really panning out in real life the way they said it would. And so, unfortunately, if anybody broke a leg, we go to the emergency department, right? They're great for emergencies, but I wasn't in that. I was in internal medicine, which is a chronic health, infections, things like that, chronic problems, chronic medical diseases. It wasn't acute infections or acute emergencies. And so, for that reason, they often failed the people and the patients. I thought that they didn't get to the root cause of the answers, and I saw people over and over and over again. And so, for me, when that happened, I thought, gosh, I really am disheartened by this part of medicine, and I'm part of the problem. So I need to do something about it. So I actually went and moved to the West Coast after a pretty painful divorce, which was part of my own personal awakening too, and started getting trained. And one of the first places I went was Gerson Therapy, because I'd heard amazing anecdotal stories from them, from people I personally knew who had done so well with their cancers after Gerson. And my eyes were kind of ripped open there. I saw these different practitioners from around the world who said, "Oh, yeah, that's against America's medical mafia." And they just talk nonchalantly like that. And I just could not believe it. And so Gerson really helped me to see environmental toxicities and how they play a role in our health and our chronic diseases. And ever since then, I've been on a mad search for the root cause of all problems, which is my goal for all my patients. I want them to have answers.
I love that philosophy and that mission. Now, speaking of environmental toxins, we are exposed to so many, and I know recently you've been talking a lot about mold because that's something that your boyfriend was dealing with. So can you talk and tell us about mold?
For sure. So, because I have such personal experience with it, my boyfriend and I live together. So, this has been over a 6 month journey now with him. And I have learned, I feel like, eons and years of information just in the process, being able to witness what I've seen. It was a gift for me, even though it's been such a lesson for him too. So most of his life he was infected. Now, let me just start by saying that mold is so damaging to people's quality of life, and the longer you have it, the more indolent and chronic this infection is. So you have to be patient with how you treat it. This is not something that's going to be treated overnight. It's similar and runs with Lyme disease and other chronic infections and heavy metals. And so it's something that you have to stick to the regimen, that it starts to give you gradual improvement. And you're going to have bad days, guys, and it's going to be months. So mycotoxin illness is something so serious that is completely underdiagnosed. Doctors don't know to look for it, and I'm concerned about these patients. Advanced mold leads to things like ALS and even MS in some patients, and the symptoms run very closely with heavy metals.
Well, what are some of those symptoms? How would someone know to check for either heavy metals or for mold?
So, if you've ever had any known water damage and then you can kind of concurrently put symptoms together with that, that's the first thing to look for, especially if you had, a basement flood, a leak under a crawl space, a bathroom that's had water in the floor. That's the first clue. And then a lot of people, you have a certain genotype that predisposes them to mycotoxin illness. The general symptoms are, maybe a new onset asthma, upper respiratory symptoms, brain fog, headaches, recurrent sinusitis that doesn't ever seem to quite get better for people. The brain fog is unreal. The words finding difficulty, almost a depersonalization where they feel like their body doesn't belong to them, their life doesn't belong to them. Really procrastination, electric static shocks in the middle of the night. They even can cause temperature dysregulation. So people are resistant to wanting to go sweat, which actually kills these suckers. It actually can regulate or dysregulate, should I say, the adrenal or excuse me, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And so people really feel exhausted or wired but tired. They have mad anxiety. It's terrible. And they often have even problems waking up in the middle of the night or having the urge to urinate quite frequently because it can dysregulate their antidiuretic hormone in their body. So it's a mass systemic dysregulation of the immune system, as well as an inflammatory cascade that's set off in people. This often goes with mast cell and histamine intolerances as well.
Wow. And a lot of the symptoms that you mentioned are things that I think are typically written off by not only doctors, but even people themselves. They might not even think to bring up certain of these symptoms because they don't even think anything of it.
And what do you say to people like depersonalization? I feel like our language is so archaic. It doesn't really encompass all the feelings that people have. What does depersonalization mean to a patient? You have to really tease that out and use different adjectives and sentences to make people understand what that means because they can't recognize it sometimes in themselves even.
Right.
Yeah.
So if someone thinks maybe they have mold toxicity, what's their next step? How do they get tested for that?
For sure. So there are a number of different tests, and I'm going to give you a couple of the controversial ones first. So there's one called the Marcan's test, and it's actually a nasal swab that tests for coag-negative Staph aureus. And that's not a mold, obviously, that's a bacteria. But oftentimes this can indicate a problem with mycotoxin illness and just biotoxin illness in general that's widespread and systemic throughout the body. That's actually a nice first step. It's not quite as expensive. And then there's also on Life After Mold or lifeaftermold.com, there's actually a visual contrast test. So people who have mold and mycotoxin illness, it can actually start to interrupt their visual testing, and they'll start to they have this test where the arrows are kind of pointed in different directions. People who have mold can't see them. After they start to get closer together, they can't see them. The mycotoxins actually interfere with the visual field. And Lyme disease can too, by the way. So these symptoms overlap.
And so someone with Lyme doesn't necessarily have mold and someone with mold doesn't necessarily have Lyme, but they seem to often come together, or what's the connection there?
Yes, absolutely. Now you're onto something. So Candida is the same way. Absolutely. And mycotoxin illness can actually kind of like heavy metals act as a wall of inflammation. So you can't heal the Lyme or the Candida or co-infections until the heavy metals and mold are removed. And it does that because mold affects all those symptoms I mentioned earlier. Your stress, your sleep, your ability to think straight, your ability to detox, everything is dysregulated. So your immune system is so damaged that it lets other things hop on board. Come on board, frenemies. Let's overtake the immune system. That's how this works. So people are very susceptible if they're exposed to Lyme, which we still aren't certain how people get, really. If they're exposed to Candida, think about the food in this country. We're so exposed, and if these are opportunistic. So if your immune system suffers, then yeah, they're gonna jump on board.
Wow, I can imagine that's really overwhelming because you go to your naturopath and you think you have one problem, and then it turns out you have multiple issues.
Yes, absolutely. So for sure, that's a big problem is people don't really know where to go and what questions to ask of people when they have these symptoms either. So I feel like people just aren't given the information, and a lot of the problem is just a lack of education about where to go with some of this.
Right, because if you go to a regular conventional doctor, like you mentioned, they're probably not going to test you for these things, and they might not even believe in them, right?
Totally. And, I got to be honest with you, I wasn't taught about things that are very much talked about nowadays, like the endocannabinoid system. I was briefly taught about mold, briefly taught about nutrition. And so I don't want to lump all medical doctors into one category. However, the majority of the ones that I knew wouldn't think to look for a mycotoxin or mold illness in the majority of their patients. And I feel like most people are exposed at some point in their lives.
So where does a person who thinks that they have mold, where do they go to? How do they get help?
So there are a lot of different resources. There's a great book called Break the Mold by Jill Carnahan that just came out that's really great. And she's a great resource too. I just went to a bunch of lectures and seminars and taught myself and then healed my boyfriend who happened to have mold. So obviously this thing kind of fell in my lap and I became super educated really fast on it. And now since I have such a platform, I want to promote that. So I tend to teach the patients to teach their doctors. So let's say you live in a rural place. Let's say you don't have access to a functional doctor. You can sometimes find naturopaths that'll do Skype consults and telephone consults with you. But if you can't find someone, my goodness, where do you look? I want you to have the resources and know the right symptoms, know the right questions, know that what tests to ask for, and you can go and teach the medical doctors, which is what I'm hoping people will be able to do. If you're lucky enough to live in a metropolitan area where you can find a naturopathic or functional medicine doctor, by all means, most of them have heard of this and will be ready and willing to test you if you're armed with any of this information.
I love that you really teach people to be their own doctor in a way. And that doesn't mean don't go to the doctor. That means be knowledgeable and understand what's going on with your body so that you can go to the doctor and ask the right questions and find the right practitioner to help you.
Correct. Absolutely.
So mercury is another toxin that you brought up. So this is something that I talk about a lot with my own clients because in New York City, everyone goes out to sushi all of the time. And it turns out a lot of people have mercury poisoning because of it. So this is something I really drive home to my clients all the time, that seafood's healthy, but you want to choose low mercury seafood. You want to choose wild to limit the amount of mercury that you're getting and to choose smaller fish. So tell us a little bit about mercury. How would someone know if they have too much, and what would they do about it if they do?
For sure. So mercury is difficult, and a lot of the symptoms that it can elicit are similar to other disorders. It can cause a lot of numbness, tingling, paresthesias, and once it gets in the brain, which is very susceptible to mercury toxicity, it can kind of cause a lot of mood disorders and things that are similar to labels such as ADHD, bipolar disorder, mood swings, anger problems, cognitive defects, even extreme shyness can be due to mercury toxicity. And so a lot of people don't understand that their brain fog and some of their paresthesias, which is numbness in extremities, can be caused by heavy metals. Mercury is a big culprit for that one. Lead is linked to severe anxiety, and lead can be found in old paints and even the soil. And then, there are things like cesium, there are things like aluminum, and all these things can precipitate certain risk factors for certain chronic diseases. And again, heavy metals are something that are mostly overlooked by most general practitioners, unfortunately. They think that people really have to be acting like the Mad Hatter, who, by the way, was mad because he had mercury poisoning, before they'll test people. And there is a gradient. There is a gradient to where people have these symptoms. So really don't let this be bypass in your patients. This can advanced mold, advanced heavy metals, if they're missed, can lead to things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, MS. That's what these are. And so, honestly, they're super easy to test for. You can provocate them out with oral agents and do a urine test through Great Plains Lab. There are also people who do IV chelation and then go and check for them because these suckers hide in the tissues and bones. So if you're doing something like cilantro and you suspect heavy metal toxicity, or you've been tested and it shows heavy metal toxicity, be sure you're doing binders too. Binders are super important for mycotoxins or mold, as well as heavy metals. Bind, sweat. My recipe is kill, bind, sweat, kill, bind, sweat, kill, bind, sweat. That's the Dr. Jess protocol. It sweats out, two birds with one stone, molds and heavy metals. And so this is extremely important for people who just eat cilantro. All you're doing is recirculating the heavy metals out of the tissues. You must have a binder to actually pull it out of the body. So
if you could expand on that a little bit and tell us, if someone does have mercury poisoning or mold toxicity, what should they be adding to their diet? What supplements should they be taking? What food should they be eating to help in their recovery process?
So absolutely. And that's just kind of rolling right after the last topic. So basically, cilantro and chlorella have been shown in a study or two to chelate almost 80% of heavy metals. So that in nature's way of giving you guys something that stirs up the heavy metals and mold and chelates. I also really love a binder product called GI Detox by Biobotanical Research, which is the same company that makes biocidin. Is a competing product with my product, Microbiome, but ultimately my protocol involves alternating each of those for 1 month and then using the binder GI Detox, which contains activated charcoal, zeolite clay, aloe vera, apple pectin, humic, and fulvic acid. And so, of course, you guys can take these things separately. Even chlorophyll is a great binder, but it's kind of convenient when it's in one package. So I like to have my patients take Microbiome or biocidin, wait an hour so that digests, and then take the binder and then go sweats, either an infrared sauna. Some people are really too debilitated and their immune system is so low they can't go sweat. It's too harsh on their system at this time, and they need rest more than sweating. At that point, I say, if you can tolerate an infrared sauna, start there.
I love infrared saunas and I recommend that for people as well, even just across the board, because it's always great to just get a good sweat in. You feel so good after it. But I remember a couple years ago, I was in LA and they didn't have this in New York at the time, but now they do. There was a company that had these infrared sauna pods. It was essentially like a sleeping bag that had infrared sauna. It was insulated with infrared sauna technology, and you lay in this thing while you watch TV for an hour and you sweat like your entire body is in it except your head. And I like heat, I like sweating, I like saunas, and I was dying. And I actually felt sick afterwards, so I vowed to never do it again. So can you speak to, is there too much of a good thing? Is there too much infrared?
For sure. There's always a balance with everything. For most of the people who have, if they actually have mycotoxins and heavy metals, it's like their body has a resistance to sweating, like they get nauseous. They actually have a systemic reaction to it, which is telling your body something. Of course, you can get too hot. I think even hot yoga can be too hot sometimes for people. So just listen to your body. You don't want to overheat, and that is a risk. But I also need you guys to sweat. It's healthy to sweat every day. It really is, at least for 20 or 30 minutes. And you really want to avoid things like alcohol too, especially beer, hops, barley. That is aspergillus. That's mold. So seriously, if someone thinks they have mold, be careful with that. Be careful, like you said, with fish for heavy metals, even some, even glyphosate, anything with pesticides often runs with heavy metals too, and these two can bind up and bypass the gut barrier, and then they damage organs that get the most blood flow. So it's very, very important to be aware of heavy metals and where it's tap water. Vaccines, even certain vaccines have heavy metals still, and aluminum especially is an adjuvant. So people really need to be aware of these things. I'm not advocating or not advocating for anything. I'm here to deliver and disseminate information. So
Yeah, I'm totally on board with you on that. I don't like aluminum and I avoid it as much as I can. Actually, at Thanksgiving, my sister was putting the leftovers away and she started to wrap the things and she was about to use aluminum foil, and it was like I was like in slow motion, like, no, here's the non-toxic, non-bleached parchment paper.
I love it. I love it.
So yeah, all about the aluminum free life. So let's talk a little bit about sugar. We know this is not good for anyone in general, but in particular for someone who's suffering from either mold or mercury. Why is it so problematic?
For sure. And even that more so with candida, which by the way, often runs with mold, like I said, because your immune system's so dysregulated. And candida, those people have insatiable sugar cravings. I mean, literally, like they will tear open their cabinets and search for anything with sugar in it. It almost makes them different people because their brain is being controlled by these pathogens. So literally be careful with sugar. Fermented foods, even kombucha was really hard for my boyfriend to heal when he was drinking that. So, and if you look at store-bought kombucha, it does have a high sugar content, so people have to be aware. Other things that contain mold, so corn, you have to think about GMO corn with Bt toxin that sits in silos and just sits and gathers what? Mold. So be really careful with corn. Wheat products are also very processed and not like their natural state. So be careful with wheat. Anything barley, rye, peanuts. Think about peanuts that sit in those big canisters and containers at like Whole Foods or some of the grocery stores, and you grind them. Those are sitting there in a moisturized container a lot of times. So be careful with things like that. Even some cheeses, obviously, are aged, have mold. Cottonseed, sorghum are a couple places. Like I mentioned, almost all alcoholic beverages, but beer is the biggest culprit. Certain nuts, you have to be really, really careful. Cashews, pecans, peanuts, Brazil nuts, even some spices and things where you have to be careful where you're sourcing some of those. Oh, and coffee too. Coffee is a big one. I just broke a lot of people's hearts with that one.
Everyone's like, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink?
Seriously, I know it's tough. And I think as long as you're getting more organic, more local, you got to think things aren't traveling at long distances, sitting in places with different humidity where they can are at risk for this. So the more you eat in season and local, the more you reduce your risk of things like this.
Yeah, that's great. I'm a huge proponent of shopping at the farmer's market whenever you can. If you have one close by, it's the food, it's not, you can't find it fresher. It tastes better than you're going to get at the grocery store. So it's like, it's a win-win.
Amen to that.
So you mentioned this feeling of being wired and tired, which I think is something a lot of people can relate to, especially here in New York and in the major cities. So besides for the mycotoxins and the mercury, are there other reasons people might be feeling this wired and tired feeling?
Yes, absolutely. And what I'll just lump that one category into is hidden or self-infections. So if your body's constantly fighting something and it's hiding from the body in so let's say a biofilm that we've mentioned a couple times, which is this nasty little matrix byproduct they secrete and hide in. So the body can't find it. It's constantly fighting aimlessly, and that'll wear you out. So that's one reason people have HPA axis, lovingly known as adrenal fatigue. That's one reason they have it. The other reason can be that your lifestyle choices can be not quite as mindful as we'd like. If you're in a toxic career or a toxic relationship, or you have toxic people or things around you, that can definitely spin our axis out of control. And a lot of times, if we aren't connected to our bodies very much, we aren't paying attention to how we're feeling and how we're treating ourselves every day. And then we wake up one day with a life that we definitely don't want. So make sure that you're making conscious lifestyle choices in a life that you are choosing, that you want to build and live. Another reason people can have adrenal fatigue is an emotional trauma. Or stress or something really physical. It can be surgery. It could be a death of a loved one. Anything like that can really knock us down and cause some PTSD, which can spin our axis out of control as well. And those are really the main things, in my opinion, that really cause people to have adrenal fatigue. Any sort of chronic illness can do it too. Really fighting all the time can be a stress on the body. Living a life that we don't want, that's not our purpose, can do it. And any sort of past trauma, emotional, physical.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the more emotional part of it, and like having a trauma or not being in the career that you want to be and not on your path, that can actually trigger real physical illness, because I think it's hard, or it's still not widely accepted, that these things can actually cause physical problems.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's one of the questions I always screen my patients. There's certain things I ask, and that's one thing I always ask. How was your childhood? How was your life growing up? Are you happy with what you're doing now? If money didn't exist, what would you do? And I watch people and I see what's connected, to how their happiness and their health overall looks, and what's happened to them in the past or the choices they've made to get there. It's really all connected. And I noticed that, a lot of people that have a lot of chronic health issues had some adverse childhood events happen that really did connect to everything. And half my job is being a psychologist and just letting patients be heard.
Yeah, because a lot of times people don't have anyone to speak to, and they don't have anyone to confide in, and they don't have super close relationships. And just with myself, so I'm recently engaged to an Indian man, and his family and his culture is so community oriented. when, his family's coming over, it's not just his like immediate brother, sister, it's the cousins, it's the aunts, like they travel, they go on vacation together. Like, it's so community oriented. Whereas in America, I feel like our culture is not so much, we're very individualistic. You're 18, you're out of the house and you kind of do your own thing. You see your parents, on the holidays and like, that's it. So there really is something to, humans need to be in community. We're social creatures and we need that connection and those really strong relationships to really be our healthiest, happiest self.
Absolutely. First of all, congratulations, by the way. That's awesome. I feel like I was Indian in a past life. I've been to India and I love the motherland. But yeah, I agree with you. That's one of the reasons they actually have theories about why people in Okinawa live so long. And one of them is that not only do they live their purpose up until the very end of their life, they have a purpose in the community and they feel needed, but they have a community. They have a community who needs them. It's everything that you want. You want to feel like you're making a difference and you're here for a purpose. And they have established that and kept that tradition on that island. And these people live the longest in the world because that's part of it.
Right. Yeah. That's the blue zones, right? Those are all the different areas across the world where people pretty regularly live to 100 and beyond. And one of those common denominators is definitely the community aspect, but also the having a purpose. That is very, very important.
Yep. You got it. It's a beautiful thing to watch those people in their community.
Yeah. So, and what about viruses? Because we hear a lot now, there's this whole celery juice craze and trend, which was started by the medical medium. And he talks a lot about Epstein Barr virus and different viruses and how that can lead to issues down the line. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I honestly feel like behind every chronic condition, like I said, I want to get to the root cause, like I said in the beginning. So ultimately, when people have things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis or hypothyroidism, when they have things like diabetes type 2, when they have, or type 1, when they have things like rheumatoid arthritis, I want to know why is your body attacking itself, as they will say. And quite honestly, I do agree with medical medium in that I don't think the body is attacking itself. I do think that there's some sort of hidden trigger, and our labs are lacking. Our labs are archaic in some senses, especially still in the hospital systems. And so, we don't even know how to properly test for Epstein Barr in a lot of cases, which is a hidden virus. And I think a lot of our tests show past infections that we think are no longer a problem, when really they still are a problem, especially if those numbers are off the charts in some cases. And so I honestly feel like there are hidden viral triggers, or bacterial triggers for that matter, that can trigger things like autoimmune conditions. And all autoimmune conditions are connected to gut health. And so really things like bloating, inflammation, quote unquote leaky gut, which is a permeable gut membrane, are risk factors for autoimmune conditions. So celery juice is very nice because it helps to repair the gut lining. And although there aren't a lot of studies, because there's not a lot of money to be made by researching celery, there are some studies from foreign countries, especially done on animals like rats, that show quite amazing benefits for continued celery juice consumption. And that some of that includes improvement in ulcers, improvement in acid reflux and bloating, and even bacterial colonies in some cases. And so celery juice in a lot of my patients, I can't say enough. Of course, it's not the magic bullet because we're all individuals with different genes, and some things that work for one person don't work for another. But the majority of my patients have gotten great benefit from that, and it's really helped their gut health.
Yeah, I love it, actually. I have it not every day, but when I remember to get celery, I'll definitely have it, and I really enjoy it, and I think it's tasty.
Do you really? Oh, I don't.
It kind of tastes, sometimes it tastes a little bit like pickle juice, but I kind of like it.
That's good, though. You know what that means? I tell people all the time, my patients will come to me and I'll tell them dietary guidelines, and they'll look at me like I have three heads. And I'll say, please just try it for me. I'll give you this gut cleanse. It'll make it a little bit better because we'll get rid of stuff that causes cravings. They come to me a month later and they say, that stuff I used to hate, broccoli, it's my favorite food now. And it's because we've killed off pathogenic bacteria and let their more harmonious, beneficial bacteria flourish, and their palate has changed. And so that's funny that you've kind of gained a liking for celery juice. Your bacteria maybe are liking it.
Yeah, they're happy in there. So, speaking of viruses, it can be really scary and overwhelming to think if you had a virus when you were a kid, like Epstein Barr, which many of us did. I know I did. And I got pretty much every virus that was going through my school. I was sick all of the time. But it can be scary to think, okay, I was sick. I had the virus when I was a kid. Now, does this mean I'm doomed for the rest of my life? So, for someone who has had Epstein Barr or has been infected with other viruses over their lifetime, is it possible to still live a healthy life and to avoid those reflares?
For sure. I will say that there have been, I haven't seen a lot of research done on it, any scientific research, but there have been a lot of anecdotal studies that say that people can actually get a negative herpes test in the blood after having it. And that's done by a combination of things that Dr. Klinghardt, who's a very famous infectious disease doctor that I really respect, has talked about, like autonomic response testing or muscle testing and different viral anti-herbals, or excuse me, antiviral herbals, should I say. And so I have not personally witnessed that or seen the research on that. However, I have heard many people speak of this. Most viruses in general, and what the medical community will tell you, is that you cannot get rid of them, that they lie dormant, considering like the herpes virus, for example, it lives in dermatomes or certain nerves in the body and can reactivate in these same nerve patterns. That's why when a lot of people get cold sores or even genital herpes, it'll come in the same pattern. And so the viruses, unfortunately, we haven't been able to eradicate completely, we don't have a cure for the common cold, obviously, same reason. So, but you can actually change your life and your health so much that you're so healthy, your immune system seems to catch it before there's any flare. And a big portion of that is the stress that you can control in your life. If you notice, a lot of these viruses are so opportunistic, they wait till you're down and out and then they bam, hit your immune system. They're so lovely. So, really watching your stress and your diet, the inflammatory people, things, careers, all the things we talked about are important to treating viruses too. And eating a lot of high vibration foods, doing a lot of things that are self-loving, taking the pause button or sacred pause, as you will, to kind of take a breath and think before you jump, because in this community we're so reactive. I think reactivity breeds inflammation. Inflammation breeds viral attacks or pathogenic attacks in general. Whew, deep breath, guys, with the inflammation, right?
Yeah, just breathing, even just breathing. I think sometimes we forget to breathe, right, and calm ourselves down.
Absolutely.
I think if you ask 10 different people what a healthy lifestyle is, they'll give you 10 different answers. So I'm curious, what would you recommend as a healthy lifestyle and healthy diet? Like, what are just some of your top level habits that you think are really important for people to have?
I think that people need to be proactive. And so if you don't feel well or you aren't getting the answers you need to be your own best doctor and investigator, actually. And don't take no for an answer. And don't make people think you don't know your body or you're stupid about what's going on, which I think happens a lot with people who have very rigid healthcare providers who don't step outside the box quite often. And so don't give up on that. I also think that eating a diet that your ancestors would recognize, getting rid of things like processed grains, processed breads that have ingredients we can hardly pronounce, and lots of processed dairy, things that, even a hamburger or a French fry, our ancestors wouldn't really know that's food. And so, if you can't reach in your cabinet or fridge and cook with it, probably shouldn't eat it. That's really how you stay healthy too. Chemical-free diet, that means chemical-free household cleaners, makeup if you can help it, water filter because no one should be drinking out of the tap water, chemical-free, even cookware and toothpaste is super important. So all these things can kind of protect your genes, if you will. Genes are very susceptible to epigenetic changes. The other things people can do, make sure that you take some time out for yourself every day, whatever you like to do. My personal thing is yoga. I love yoga, but that may not be yours. And I want you to find out what makes you happy, because part of the reason you're here is also for your happiness too. So that's really important for people. It's important also if you emotional mental health is just as important as physical health. And that gets it's really underrated in this country. And it's a shame, because people suffer just as much with mental health as they do physical health. And so if you are unhappy, sad, you don't feel like you have a support system, you feel like your moods are up and down, there's a reason for that. And oftentimes that mental health is connected to physical health. So be sure to seek that out too. I also want to tell people, sweat every day. Sweat, move your body. If you have the privilege, it's a privilege. Move your body every day. And then again, take time for a sacred pause to take a moment to be grateful, or to meditate, or whatever it may be, pray, whatever your choice is. And those are really the things for health for me. Chemical-free lifestyle. Don't give up if you're called crazy and you think something's wrong. Don't give up. Don't drink out of the tap water. Meditate, sacred pause, move your body every day, and sleep. Best doctor there is.
Yeah, for sure. I've recently bought some blue light blocking glasses, which I'm obsessed with. So,
I have some. I have some right here. We should wear them here.
We should be wearing them
for the rest of the interview. I'm not even joking.
We should.
They might be the same ones, actually. They're pretty close. So.
Yeah. No, it's so amazing because my eyes used to get so red and just irritated at the end of the day from looking at the screen, and it makes such a difference in your eyes, right? And it's just, I've never had a problem sleeping, but it's supposed to help you sleep better, right? Because you're not getting that blue light before bed.
Oh man. And us as entrepreneurs with things like this, I mean, this is our business, is on technology. And so they're really important because, just to tell you guys, if you don't know what these do, is they block the blue light from screens, from the computer and phone. And it is kind of a habit to wear them. You can forget quite easily, but that blue light tells your pineal gland here to continue producing, cortisol. And so that's obviously from your pituitary. The pineal produces melatonin. So cortisol is like the sun. Melatonin is like the moon. Obviously if this blue light is in your face after the sun goes down, you guys are going to have trouble going to sleep. So, and it almost produces like a static kind of vibration in the body a little bit, the Wi-Fi, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, can you speak to that? And I know Wi-Fi is bad, and I think we've heard this, but I have a Wi-Fi router in my apartment. My apartment's not that big, and I know you're supposed to put your phone on airplane mode when you sleep, but I honestly rarely do that. But why is it important? Like, why should we be concerned with Wi-Fi?
For sure. So, there's been, and it's unfortunate because this isn't publicized, and a lot of the phone companies don't like the studies that are coming out there, but there has been a plethora of studies, human and animal, on Wi-Fi, and some in foreign countries actually as well, not just the US, and have shown that mycotoxins explode 600 times when placed near a Wi-Fi router. And some of the other studies have shown that the microbiome is actually changed at certain frequencies, and certain frequencies also are more beneficial for pathogenic bacteria to grow. So this is really concerning. It may change antibiotic resistance and bacterial resistance in our microbiomes. This is really worrisome for me, and 5G is coming. I mean, it's right around the corner, and people are begging for it. And I'm just kind of like, you guys don't even know what it's doing to our bodies, and we're just begging for higher speeds. And really, it's quite concerning to me. So without the information being put out there, I don't know how people will know better. So, and I know if people know better, they usually do better.
Right. So, okay. So you're making me really want to put my phone on airplane mode at night.
Please do it, Maria. Please. I'm telling you, I've gotten in the habit of doing it too. And I do think that it makes a difference. I mean, if it's the least we can do is not have certain waves that we can't see or invisible, that we really don't know what happens to us floating through our house when we sleep. So
right. And I think that's part of the problem, is because it is invisible. So people are like, oh, well, like they don't think about it. And it doesn't seem like, oh, can it really do anything? But it definitely, it can.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like microwaves and sun rays. We can't see those either, really, but.
Exactly. So besides for putting your phone on airplane mode, is there anything else we could do? I mean, should we all switch back to the plug-in, dial up?
Actually, you know what? It's not a bad idea. And I'm thinking about getting a desktop just for that purpose in my house, actually. Yeah, because I know it's going to be so bad everywhere that we're going to be surrounded everywhere else. So in my home or my sanctuary, it would at least be nice not to have it floating around right beside me. The other thing people need to watch out for is Bluetooth. It's really, really cool to have it in your car. Actually, my boyfriend put me onto this, and I kind of looked at the studies, and he was right. Bluetooth is something we all love to have in our car. It's super fun to listen to your own music, but be careful. You can actually ground with a wire would be a lot safer than having Bluetooth running for hours driving in our car.
Oh man. And it's everywhere. And the thing I'm just thinking, like, I'm in an apartment building. So even if I didn't have Wi-Fi, my neighbor has it, and my neighbor across the hall has it, and the neighbor on the other side of me has it. And
yeah. And we're all so crazy. We're like, this person's still in my Wi-Fi, and we all lock it out. So we all have to give it separate Wi-Fi systems. It's like, oh man, I know.
Yeah.
It's a problem. It's a problem. There are there are crazy ways to block it, but through the walls with certain metals and things, but it's crazy.
Yeah. And that's why I'm always a huge proponent of doing whatever we have control over. Like, for example, your diet, or taking the toxins out of your cleaning supplies and your cookware, and not eating out of plastic and those sorts of things. So, reduce your toxin load as much as humanly possible. And then, we're living in 2018. We're going to have to deal with some Wi-Fi. So just do the best that we can in each moment.
Exactly. Make wise choices. You can only control what you can control, and you could drive yourself crazy probably thinking about all this stuff all the time. So basically what happens is it's a fine balance between your detoxification pathways in the skin, liver, kidneys, and the different organs, and your genetic predisposition, right? So if you can also change your genes, not just from bad, but for environments can change them good too. You can upgrade genes as well as having genetic mutations in a negative way. And so, you have the power to steer your life depending on your choices. 90% of chronic illness is based on lifestyle choices. So don't be afraid, guys. You can reduce your toxin burden. You can get your genes checked out. You can look at where you need to improve. You can be your own best doctor and be your own best advocate. You really can.
I love that. I love that message so much.
Thank you.
One last question, and this is something that I like to ask all my guests. We've talked about so many different things, and there's so many different ways that you can be healthy. But if you can leave our listeners with just one tip or one piece of advice for living their healthiest and happiest life, what would that be?
Ultimately, when you're healthy, you're happy. And so you need to ask yourself, is this what you want of your life? Are you happy? And if you're healthy and physically you're happy, I think, and if you're mentally you're healthy, you're definitely happy. So I think that people, if you're not happy, you need to ask yourself why, and then you need to start change from there. And don't be so hard on yourself. Know that change takes time. But health is not all physical. It really starts with our thoughts, in my opinion. And happiness, that's why you're here. You're here to find happiness. And that happiness, when you find it, it radiates to other people. And that starts with physical, mental, and soul health. It does.
I love that. For more from Dr. Jess, you can head to her website, drjess.com, or her Instagram, which is dr.jess.md. And like I said earlier, it is just a wealth of information. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm wishing you all the happiest and healthiest of holidays.